Joseph was the beloved son of Jacob, born in his old age, and cherished deeply above all his brothers. His father gave him a coat of many colors, a symbol of favoritism and love. This gift stirred jealousy and hatred among his siblings. Joseph had dreams that foretold his future greatness. He saw his brothers bowing down to him in symbolic visions. When he shared these dreams, their anger grew even stronger. They mocked him and plotted against him. His innocence became the source of their envy. The seeds of betrayal were being planted. God, however, had already written a greater plan for Joseph's life. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers in the fields. They conspired against him the moment they saw him coming. Hatred clouded their hearts and poisoned their thoughts. Some wanted to kill him, but Reuben persuaded them to spare his life. Instead, they cast him into a dry cistern in the wilderness. Later, as they ate, a caravan of Ishmaelite traders passed by. Greed replaced their rage, and they sold Joseph as a slave for silver. They dipped his coat in goat's blood and deceived their father. Jacob wept bitterly, believing Joseph had been torn by wild beasts. His heart was broken, yet God's plan was unfolding in silence. Joseph was taken to Egypt, far away from home and family. He was purchased by Potiphar, captain of Pharaoh's guard. Though a slave, Joseph served faithfully and with integrity. The Lord was with him, blessing all that he touched. Potiphar saw his excellence and promoted him over his entire household. Everything prospered under Joseph's careful hands. Yet trials followed as Potiphar's wife grew envious of his virtue. She attempted to seduce him repeatedly, but he refused. Out of anger, she falsely accused him of wrongdoing. Innocence led Joseph to prison, but God's favor did not leave him. Even in prison, Joseph rose above despair. The jailer noticed his wisdom and placed him in charge of other prisoners. Joseph ministered with compassion and discernment. Two of Pharaoh's servants, the cupbearer and baker, were also confined there. Each had troubling dreams, which Joseph interpreted through God's power. The cupbearer would be restored, but the baker would be executed. Joseph pleaded with the cupbearer to remember him before Pharaoh. Yet when the man was released, he forgot Joseph completely. Years passed as Joseph remained behind bars. Despite injustice, Joseph clung to faith and trusted God's timing. Pharaoh himself was troubled by dreams that none could explain. His magicians and wise men failed to interpret their meaning. At last, the cupbearer remembered Joseph and his gift. He told Pharaoh about the Hebrew prisoner in the dungeon. Joseph was summoned quickly and brought before the king. With humility, Joseph declared that interpretations belonged to God alone. Pharaoh revealed his dreams of fat cows and lean cows, full ears of grain and withered ones. Joseph explained they foretold 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. God had sent a warning, and preparation was required. Pharaoh listened carefully to Joseph's wisdom. Pharaoh recognized the Spirit of God working in Joseph. He elevated him from prisoner to ruler over Egypt. Only Pharaoh himself remained higher in authority. Joseph was clothed in royal garments and given a signet ring. He rode in the second chariot of Egypt, greeted by shouts of honor. During the 7 years of abundance, Joseph stored grain throughout the land. His foresight preserved Egypt's strength when famine came. The land was struck with severe hunger, but Egypt had food. Nations from afar journeyed to purchase grain from Joseph's hand. God had positioned him as the savior of many lives. Back in Canaan, Jacob and his sons faced the harsh famine. Hearing of food in Egypt, Jacob sent his sons to buy grain. They appeared before Joseph, not recognizing their brother. Joseph, however, knew them immediately, but concealed his identity. He tested their honesty and hearts through a series of trials. Simeon was kept as a hostage until Benjamin was brought. Their guilt over selling Joseph weighed heavily upon them. Joseph watched with a heart torn between love and restraint. He longed to reveal himself, but waited for God's moment. The drama of reconciliation was unfolding by divine design. Eventually, the brothers returned with Benjamin, their youngest. Joseph's heart burned with emotion when he saw him. He wept in secret, unable to contain his compassion. To test them further, he placed his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. When accused, the brothers defended Benjamin with loyalty. Judah even offered himself as a slave in his place. Joseph saw their transformation and knew they had changed. He could no longer hide his true identity. Weeping loudly, he declared, "I am Joseph, your brother." Fear gripped them, but Joseph comforted them. He spoke of God's providence in turning evil into good. Joseph forgave his brothers with tears and embraced them. He sent word for Jacob and the family to come to Egypt. Pharaoh welcomed them and gave them the best land of Goshen. Jacob rejoiced to see Joseph alive after so many years. God's promise to Abraham continued through the preservation of Israel. Jacob blessed Pharaoh and lived peacefully in Egypt's land. Before his death, Jacob blessed each of his sons. He instructed them to bury him in Canaan with his fathers. Joseph honored his father's last wishes faithfully. Love and reconciliation triumphed over past betrayal. After Jacob's death, Joseph's brothers feared revenge, but Joseph reassured them with words of comfort and grace. "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good," he said. His faith declared God's sovereignty over every trial. Joseph continued to provide for his family generously. He lived to see his children and grandchildren flourish. Before his death, Joseph reminded them of God's covenant promise. He made them swear to carry his bones back to Canaan. His life testified that God's plans never fail. From betrayal to blessing, Joseph's journey revealed God's faithful hand. As Joseph aged, his wisdom became a light to all of Egypt. His leadership preserved nations and ensured peace. Pharaoh and the people respected him as a man of God. His children Manasseh and Ephraim were blessed by Jacob before his death. These blessings ensured that Joseph's line would continue within Israel. Joseph carried the memory of his father's homeland in his heart. Egypt was his place of service, but Canaan was his inheritance. Through famine and abundance, Joseph never forgot God's promise. He lived with humility, never boasting in his power. His faith stood as an anchor until his final days. When Jacob died, sorrow filled the household of Israel. Joseph mourned deeply, honoring his father with great devotion. With Pharaoh's permission, he led a grand procession to Canaan. Egyptians and Hebrews alike traveled to bury Jacob with dignity. At Machpelah, the cave of the patriarchs, Jacob was laid to rest. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and Rebekah rested there also. Joseph wept at the graveside, remembering the long journey of faith. Returning to Egypt, Joseph comforted his trembling brothers. They feared that revenge might now consume him, but Joseph's heart was full of forgiveness, not bitterness. Joseph spoke to them with compassion and grace. "Do not be afraid," he said, "for am I in God's place?" His words silenced their fears and healed old wounds. He reminded them of God's hand guiding every event. "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." These words became a legacy for all generations to hear. Joseph embraced his brothers, providing them food and shelter. Love triumphed over betrayal in the house of Israel. The family bond was restored, stronger than before. God's promise continued to unfold through reconciliation and mercy. As years passed, Joseph remained a pillar of faith. He lived to see Ephraim's children to the third generation. His household was filled with joy and blessings. Yet Joseph knew Egypt was not Israel's final home. He reminded his people of God's covenant to Abraham. The land of Canaan awaited them as their true inheritance. Joseph gathered his brothers and children before his death. He declared that God would surely visit them. He made them swear to carry his bones from Egypt. His final words echoed with hope in God's faithfulness. Joseph's death marked the closing of an extraordinary journey. From betrayal to prison, from prison to palace, he endured. His life revealed God's wisdom and sovereignty in every trial. Even in suffering, Joseph's faith never wavered. His story became a testimony for all Israel to remember. Generations later, Moses would carry Joseph's bones to Canaan. Thus, God's promise was honored and fulfilled. The journey of Joseph foreshadowed redemption through suffering and glory. What man meant for harm, God used for salvation. His life still speaks of trust, forgiveness, and divine purpose. The memory of Joseph lived long after his death. His story was told by fathers to sons, mothers to daughters. Israel remembered how God had raised him from the pit to power. His forgiveness became a model of mercy and love. His faith inspired courage during Israel's darkest days in Egypt. Generations looked to Joseph as a sign of hope. They believed God would one day lead them home. The land of slavery would not hold them forever. Joseph's bones remained as a silent testimony in Egypt. They reminded Israel of the promise that God never forgets. When the time of deliverance finally came, Joseph's legacy was honored. Moses carried his bones during the Exodus from Egypt. Through the wilderness journey, his remains traveled with Israel. His faith continued to walk with them across the desert sands. Finally, in Canaan, Joseph was laid to rest among his fathers. The promise was completed as God had declared. From betrayal to blessing, Joseph's life revealed divine purpose. His trials became the pathway for God's greater plan. Through him, Israel was preserved and nations were blessed. His journey still shines as a story of faith and hope. Joseph's journey teaches that no suffering is wasted with God. The pit, the prison, and the palace were all steps in his plan. Betrayal could not stop the promise, and hatred could not kill destiny. God's hand guided Joseph through every season of life. His forgiveness healed his family and preserved a nation. His faith turned pain into a testimony of glory. Joseph lived with hope, and he died with promise. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button.